Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this month's Bloom Business Series webinar. My name is Jonathan Damaris. I'm the director of Downtown Inc. And today we're going to hear from some local business owners about the collaborative spirit among small businesses in downtown York. This is one of the great stories I always tell folks when they're asking about what makes downtown York so special. And really, it is the collaborative spirit between business owners. We have a great community of folks that care about our community and building up that community brand. Today's event is made possible by our presenting sponsor, PNC. So once again, thanks PNC for your ongoing support of our 2022 Bloom Business Series workshop. With us today, we have 4 local business owners whose approach is highly collaborative. They regularly do things like host group events, cross-promote with fellow businesses, and provide and share advice and best practices with their neighbors. So joining us today, we have Kate Harmon, owner of Working Progress. She is a recovering newspaper reporter and with over a decade's experience in content, editing, and social media. After spending years doing marketing and development with some of York's nonprofits, she now runs Give Local York as the Give Day coordinator. She also has several years of experience in nonprofit fundraising and event planning in Pennsylvania and in Florida. In her free time, she runs events like Restaurant Week, What the Food Trucks, Yorktoberfest, Taste of PA, and many more. She loves fundraising for the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research and has brought in over $500,000 for research in the past 10 years. Welcome, Kate. Jen Heasley, owner of Sweet Mamba's Mambo Sauce and the Game Day Kitchen Catering, is a retired York City school teacher who has pursued her passion of food, sports, and fun. She's a published cookbook author, caterer, and she manufactures her own line of sauces, and they are delicious. Jen's business is located in Central Market. Joining us today, we also have Melissa Rosario McGarry, co-owner of Cornerstone Barbershop, and she volunteers as the merchant coordinator for the WECO district in New York City, and is responsible for organizing local businesses and nonprofit organizations to host events and perform community service. She also hosts Cornerstone Cleanup, a monthly trash pickup effort in York City, and has raised money for several York County nonprofits. Melissa is also a new member of the Project Committee for the Redevelopment Authority of York. So welcome, Melissa. And joining us today also is our Jess Weichert, owner of Revolt Style Studio. Jessica's love for vintage began through her interest in affordable, eco-friendly fashion. As her vintage collection began to grow, she began doing pop-ups around the region and is now running her own boutique in downtown York. Since she started Revolt 8 years ago, she has collaborated within the downtown York business community through her work with the Market District Merchants, planning York City Boutique Week, co-founding York Flea, and planning several other community events throughout the year. Most recently, she founded 717 Vintage Fest, a regional weekend-long vintage-only vendor festival. All right, so welcome to Jess, Kate, Melissa, and Jen. Thank you for joining us today. So the way it's going to work today is I'm going to pose some questions to all of you, and for any of our attendees, as we're discussing these items in terms of collaboration, feel free to submit questions to the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And we'll definitely save some time at the end for us to answer those questions. And in the spirit of collaboration, please keep those questions coming so we can have a great dialogue here today. So the first question I'd like to pose is what was a lesson, good or bad, you learned when you first started to collaborate with other businesses? Kate, you want to get us started on that one?
Sure. I feel like it was funny. We got these questions ahead of time and I was like, ooh, these feel targeted. It's almost like we knew our experiences going into this. So when I started doing events in York, I was just out of journalism. And I feel like I knew a lot of people, but maybe they didn't know me as well. So I'm sure a lot of you can speak to this. A lot of York is like, who do you know and who knows you? So I got a lot of no's. A lot of when we did, for example, when we did What the Food Trucks and moved it to Penn Park, we have always wanted it to be a weekend long event. We always want people to come to York, stay in York on Labor Day weekend, and there's no reason to leave. We already have porta potties, we already have security, we already have a stage. If you have a great idea, come in and do it on Saturday, share our resources with us. And we got a lot of no's because a lot of people were like, who are you? And what are you trying to do? And right or wrong, people want to put their own name on what they want to do. And I get that, and that's fine. So we haven't really had anybody take us up on that. And around the same time, I was working in another nonprofit in York, and I was running one of the districts in York. And I was getting a lot of no's when it came to collaboration. I was running the district meetings and nobody was coming. I was trying to run these district things, and again, nobody was coming, nobody was helping out. But I kept trying and I kept trying and I kept trying, because I don't really take no for an answer. And I think there are two lovely ladies on this panel who can attest to, like, you keep trying and you keep plugging along. And that's how we have things like York Arts Week that are happening, because it is a testament to what keeps happening when you keep trying. And I think maybe at the time, our districts weren't ready. People weren't necessarily ready to work together. And at that time, a district wasn't working together. And now we have Jess, we have Melissa, we have these district-wide, across the city, people are working together to fill a hole that I caused by not having Yorkfest this year. And they're stepping up and they're making such wonderful things happen. So I think no's are okay. And that's a lesson that I did not want to learn. Because from it, wonderful things are going to happen. So just keep plugging along.
That's really helpful to hear, Kate. And as we've helped facilitate the Welcoming Communities grants, we've seen a wide variety of new individuals wanting to start events in New York City, and that's certainly a helpful tidbit of information there. Jen, I'll direct my next question to you. And I know you've done a few collaborative projects, but which collaborative project that you've initiated are you most proud of, if you had to choose one of the many? And can you tell us a little bit about it?
I actually discussed, like Kate said, we had these in advance. So I discussed these with my daughters. It's a lot because, like we said, I'm a retired teacher. So while I wasn't necessarily a business person at that time, I did many things that were collaborative within the district itself. So those are very dear to my heart. So we had a soul food cook-off at Hannah-Penn for several years. The community came in, the teachers cook with kids, parents cook with kids. That was very, very important to us. We did cooking camps. So we partnered with UPMC. They wrote a grant for us. We did cooking camps. So from my teacher life, those were very important to me. They were a big deal within the community, and we did a lot with our students, and our students benefited tremendously, as well as the families. From a personal standpoint, though, the ones that I've done recently, I did Sweet Mama Soul Food Sunday. So we did one, I would say Hamir. I collaborated with Hamir because we had it at his location. My daughter works with him, and I'm actually good friends with him. So we did our first one there. But then the second one we did was actually in Lancaster, and we did it at the Rockville outlets. So there were about 35 retail vendors. I had 5 soul food vendors, and we had about 500 people come. We had a DJ, we had a cigar lounge outside. So that was just from a task standpoint, and Kate, I know you can speak to, like, from a task standpoint, that was a big deal for me. And it could not have played out better. Let me just put it that way. Like it literally, the way I imagined it happening, it executed exactly the way I wanted to. So that for me was a huge success. So I'm very proud of that.
Great, wonderful.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. Next question, I'll turn over to Melissa here. And it's as we all know, when we plan events or plan these collaborative things happening, sometimes it's hard to get everybody to pull their own weight. People often make promises that, I can do this, and then when it gets closer to the date, things fall through. So what advice do you have, Melissa, about making sure everybody pulls their own weight and does their contribution to really make it effective collaboration?
I feel like for me, it really is less about ensuring that people pull their own weight, because in my experience, if you lead by example, and if I'm pulling my own weight, then I feel like other people see and respect that, and they're encouraged. Outside of that, I think it's really important to play to people's strengths. So like we have a couple of events coming up in WeGo, and we have for York Arts Week, we have an event where the chair of the event is an artist. We have an event in October called The Taste of WeGo, and the chair for the event is a chef. So I think it's important to ask people to volunteer where their strengths apply.
Great, wonderful. And just a reminder to all of our attendees today, feel free to submit any questions at any point, the Q&A function. And like I said, we'll save some time at the end for those, but we'll keep plugging away because I got a lot of great questions here. So next question here is for Jess. And this is really helpful too, because as most of us know on this call, and probably a lot of our attendees, we have a lot of events in downtown York and in New York City. And it's really important to be aware of all the other events happening. So question for you, Jess, when you're launching a new event that involves others, which I know you've done a lot of that, how do you determine things like location, date, et cetera, any important details you would want to highlight?
Yeah, sometimes the nature of the event itself can kind of dictate those sort of things. So like, for example, if it's a Halloween event, like, is it the weekend before or of Halloween? You know, the nature of the event itself can kind of narrow it down. But generally what I do when planning any sort of event or collaboration, partnership, project, anything like that, is I start with like the core group of people that absolutely need to be involved. And maybe it's like 2 or 3 other people. Start with them to get like the hard and fast details, the locations, the dates, the times, the name of the event, something like that. And then once we have those things set in stone, then we can kind of go from there and add on what we need or seek people that can fill the gaps that we need based on like the core of the event.
Wonderful. And I should have started off with this too. If anybody else wants to jump in with any answers, I know I'm asking individual questions to individual people, but if anybody else has any advice, feel free to jump in.
I wanted to add to that, Jess, that's a really great like place to start, because I know we too are often, especially with beer events, are in a similar position to Jess, where like she's the one with an idea and she goes out and says like, okay, guys, here's my idea. She grabs a couple of people and then it's like, now we go from there. So for us, for example, we are working in crocodile dog marketing, which is what I do, one of my avenues for our beer and wine festivals. We are doing a collaboration with Gift Horse, and we're bringing Brew Kids on the Block back into the streets where dining happens in the 100 block of North George. So one of the first things that we do after we pick those hard details, like Jess just said, is Matthew kind of builds this, we call it the Uber doc, and it lives in our Google Documents. And it basically is like, here's the forward facing blurb for like social media and emails. And then like, here's the nitty gritty details on the back end, which helps us kind of like internally get our messaging straight. Cause I think sometimes like when you're especially collaborating and you have all these people from different lines of work, like Melissa was saying, like you have artists, you have chefs, like not everybody's an event planner. So like if you can get everybody on the same page with like, here's the messaging, here's why we're doing this, this is what we're trying to do. It really helps keep people, and especially me, like I'm often falling into the role of like the marketing person. It helps keep me like, okay, this is why we're doing this. These are the things the pieces that I need to pull out to market, so that I don't get lost in like all the details of like, did we get the trash cans? Did we get security? Like that's not what I need to be focusing on. I need to be focusing on how we're bringing it back to the streets, and it's going to be an 80s, 90s festival. And why do we have Nerf darts? Like those kinds of details. So like that Uber doc to really help bring people who might not necessarily have events as their strength, into the mix.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. And I would add to that too, having that one document that really is your starting point. I mean, it's really important for all members who are involved in the event to be on point with the branding and the verbiage of what the event is. I mean, because we have great local media who loves telling the story of events, and it's important for if anybody's interviewed to have that focal point. And you're all sharing the same narrative, because then less confusing narrative means you have more people likely to attend your event. So.
And it means the one person doesn't have to be the same one on the news. Like you guys, I've been really enjoying watching you guys all doing York Arts Week news spots from afar. And I'm like, oh man, I need more people to be on the news. So it's not just me up to things. So kudos to you guys for all having the same, like, connected narrative and ability to jump in.
Great. I'm gonna move on to the next question. And as we all know, owning and operating a small business is a challenge. It's a blessing in some ways because you have control over what you're doing, but also, a lot of our small businesses have only one staff member, the owner, and oftentimes you can't be in more than one place at once. So, Jess, I'll ask you to start off, but if you're planning an event or a project, and a small business can't be involved on the day of the event because maybe they're running their shop or their restaurant, what are some ways that they can participate, support, or benefit from what you're doing? Jess, you want to start us with that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the obvious number one way people can participate and support an event, even if they can't be there, is social media, getting the word out, hanging posters, telling their customers, sharing things, inviting people, all that stuff. And I think that's definitely the no-brainer and the easiest way. But if someone does want to be involved in like the planning of the event, that's also welcome as well. Like, you don't have to be there to be the person that sends out the press release or make sure that the porta potties are booked and stuff like that. So I think as someone who's often finding themselves in like the coordination side of it, getting all the people involved and making sure that they're like following through and making sure that they're doing all the things that they said that they were going to do. I feel like the easiest way is like to meet people where they are. I think Melissa kind of touched on this earlier with like, if there's people that are interested in working with you and they have a certain skill set or niche, or their audience is a certain type of audience or whatever, use them for what they have, right? Like if you have a chef that loves cooking, like, okay, perfect, you're in charge of menu. And so I think people are more inclined to participate if they feel like they can excel at what they volunteered for. And if people don't have the ability to be there in person or, stuff like that, that they have other skills that they can bring to the table and be a part of the planning, organization, promotion, all of that stuff.
Great. Thanks, Jess. And before this call, I was sharing with all of our panelists, consumers in New York really have a choice when they want to do some shopping or do some eating, and they have a choice to go to the national chain restaurants or shops on Route 30 or come downtown. It's a very different experience, right? We're big in downtown New York on foot traffic. Foot traffic drives sales, increases our economic development. And when we have an event downtown, it's really important for businesses to be open because that foot traffic is vital to the sustenance of businesses. Whether it's go green the city, having your business open, so folks that are walking around may stop in, and if you're going to Route 30, you're going to a certain place, and you're going home after that. There's no foot traffic. You can try walking Route 30, but good luck with that. Anyone else want to jump in with the answer to that question there about involving businesses who necessarily can't be a part of the event, but can collaborate in some way?
Also, like sending emails or making phone calls. Like I'm a millennial. So I think that by nature, like we hate phone calls. So, hey, you might be stuck in your shop all day and you love making phone calls. Make some phone calls for me. Send some emails. A lot of coordination is emails. Whatever, just random things that people can do, helping spread posters. I hate walking around putting posters places. Maybe you've got kids that are teenagers that I did this to my friend's kids the other day. They were whining about not having anything to do. So I handed a stack of posters and table tents to them and sent them on a walkabout around the city, dragging posters from place to place, which I think might be my new idea for a street team. Need something to do with your kids after school or summer? Join our street team. There are plenty of ways that people can get involved. That's not meeting every whatever morning at 10:30 when I know that's when your shop opens. I think we've all had those moments where we couldn't make a certain meeting because that's when we're doing something, or it's lunchtime and why are you having a meeting when it's the lunch rush? All of these things, we've all been through it. So there are plenty of other ways to get involved.
Great. Well, that answer kind of segues us to our next question. In terms of our micro districts, over the past few years, we've really seen an uptick in involvement in the three different micro districts of downtown York: Market District, Royal Square District, and the WeCo District. And we've seen a lot of great collaboration within those micro districts. Melissa, I'll turn this over to you, but if someone wants to get involved in their micro district, but they're only person at their business and they're unsure of their capacity to commit, what advice do you have for them? And as we said at the front, Melissa does facilitate the WeCo District merchants. So Melissa, what advice would you have for somebody who wants to get involved in their district?
Yeah, we've actually had this exact scenario in our district. We have Penn Market in our district, so many of the Penn Market vendors are at Penn Market at 4 a.m. cooking their food, serving the food, cleaning up and closing. So they have to manage everything from start to finish. So when we first started having meetings, some of the vendors were unsure of what they could take on or what their capacity was. So what we've done with a lot of people is, just start small. Like, can you take meeting minutes? Can you write a social media post? Like Kate said, can you make phone calls? When things need to be booked for events, like, can you follow up with a phone call with a vendor to make sure what time they're going to be there? Can you create a QR code? Can you send the meeting invite to everybody? Like, can you send an email reminder? So not everything has to be, I'm planning this event from start to finish and I'm completely managing it and I'm all in. I would say just start small and see what interests you and then go from there.
Great. And I'm seeing a lot of questions come in through the Q&A. I see a question from Rebecca, a question from Michael. So keep those coming, and we'll save some time at the end to answer those questions. But Kate, you're going to jump in?
Yeah, I wanted to add too, I think a lot of the fun, having watched from afar as the districts and just, in my opinion, have just been evolving and becoming more and more awesome since my foray into that years and years ago, is watching you guys adapt to meet each other where you are, kind of. And I think that's kind of the overarching, message here is like collaboration is meeting people where they are and where they can help. Back in the day, like our meetings were like at a certain time and it was like you either come or you don't. And I think people have since now been like, okay, maybe this time just doesn't work for everybody. And so
all right, we lost Kate there, but tell you what, let's bring Jen back in here because, and actually this question relates to the question that we just got received from Michael. How do you keep everyone excited and engaged? And also, this is also important too, how do you keep from burning out? Planning events is hard work. So what's your advice you have, Jen, for keeping everybody engaged and avoiding burnout for yourself?
I think compared to the other panelists, my experience is a little bit different. The people that my resources are more my former colleagues as teachers. So my panel, those are the people that I have in the sense of like my board per se. And I actually work with a lot of my friends that don't even live in New York that help me as I, delve into my projects or whatever. So I use them as sounding boards. I also feel like it's just really important, like, because yes, all of us are working probably 7 days a week. But if I don't take like at least 1 day a week to spend time for myself or spend time with my kids, there's a serious level of burnout that takes place. So I definitely make sure that, I do at least 1 day where I have a little downtime, whether it's just cooking at my house or, whatever it might be. But I think when you talk about working and like juggling different people within, I agree with working to people's strengths. Like, who's good with preparing the food, who's good with, dealing with the people in the public, who's good with the marketing, who's good with these conversations that can be had, face to face when everyone in that space is not. Like, again, like I use my former colleagues, I use my children, my children's friends. So I know within those group of people, because for the most part, I've been with them for about 30 years, like I know who's good at what. And they'll tell me like, oh no, Jen, I don't want to do it. Like people are very candid with me. So I think that's also being upfront and honest. Like, I don't feel comfortable frying the chicken today, darn it. So, whatever it might be, like, I don't want to do it. So like, as long as you're comfortable with saying in this moment, I'll volunteer for this, but I'm not going to volunteer for this. And because I have such a great support system, that's why I'm fortunate to do what I do, because people have been, able to step up and help. But in that process, I also know them and I know who I can delegate to in those, different areas. So that's been, I guess, my plus in my business life, to be honest.
Great, thanks, Jen. And I think Melissa kind of pointed out before too, the idea of modeling it for all people involved.
That's important.
And does anybody else have any advice about keeping folks engaged and excited at the same time of avoiding burnout for yourself? And welcome back, Kate.
I think checking in regularly is really important. Because often events can take months and months to come to fruition. So making sure that you're having like regular check-ins to make sure that tasks are, the ball is rolling and things are moving along, that can be helpful too, to keep people engaged.
Great.
And I think as a like a member of a district, that over time we've worked to build like our network of businesses who like participating and stuff. And if you can build your network, not not as huge, but if you have a solid network of people, then different people can be the point person for different things. And it gives you the opportunity to say, no, I can't help with that, but I'll absolutely, in my capacity, I'll hang your poster, I'll share the Facebook event, I'll tell everyone about it. Or maybe you're middle participant, like I can't plan it, but I'll participate. And if you have enough people in your network, then you know that they'll support you when you're the one that's coordinating, and then you can support them as well.
And maybe at this time too, thank you, Jess. Maybe at this time we can, maybe Jess and Melissa can talk about the communication channels you have in place to communicate with the merchants in your district. Maybe, maybe there's some folks on this call that are not plugged into your district yet and would like to receive information. So what communication channels do you already have in place? And if folks want to be added to these email lists or whatever you have, how can they do so? You want to jump in, Melissa?
Yeah, so we have several ways that we stay in contact. One is that we have a private Facebook group. If you are in the Waco district and you'd like to be added to that, you can email me. It's cornerstonebarberyork@gmail.com. That is a really nice avenue because we can do things like take polls on the Facebook group. You can attach files in the Facebook group to share information. We put like meeting minutes in there from our meetings. Announcements go in there. Like it's basically a catch-all. And then we have meetings the first Monday of every month at Sarah Ellen Event Venue, which is at 6:30 p.m. So anyone in the Waco district who wants to be involved is more than welcome to just come to a meeting, and no pressure, no commitment, but just maybe see what we're about and see if you wanted to get involved with something.
Great, thank you, Melissa. And if anybody on this call is not quite sure what district you are in, if you're in downtown York, feel free to reach out to Downtown Inc., info@downtownyorkpa.com, and we can let you know which district you're in. And connect with the right folks. Jess, do you want to explain what you have going on in Market District in terms of merchant communication?
Yeah, so we also have monthly meetings as well. It's the first Thursday of every month at 9. We've been kind of rotating our locations recently. Over the summer, they were at Curious Little Playhouse, and then our last meeting and our next meeting is going to be at Prince Street Cafe, which is always nice to have coffee and a pastry. And then most of our communication happens through email. We send out meeting reminders and meeting notes. And then we also, for various things, we generally have, like if a person's in charge of that thing, then they're the contact person, but you can find all of that information in the Market District email. So our district email address is marketdistrictyork@gmail.com. And that's where you can find, that's where you can contact us if you have questions about like being on Beaver Street for First Friday and stuff like that. And you'll also, like I said, we send out the meeting notes and stuff like that, where you can find the individual contact information for certain specific things.
Great. So let me also, and this is another question I gave you all ahead of time, but we've talked a little bit, we've actually talked a lot today about event planning and collaboration with businesses to make events happen. But one thing that I think as merchants in downtown York, we could do more of is collaboration in terms of just sales and promotions. And we're really big at Downtown Inc. of connecting the micro districts. Downtown York is 26 blocks, and people often associate the micro districts as being separate, but in reality, oftentimes there's just a bridge in between. The Waco district has started their Cross the Creek campaign, hashtag Cross the Creek, and Royal Square is really just a block away from the market district. And I've always thought it'd be great, and this may already be happening without my knowledge, but I always thought it'd be great for businesses to collaborate across districts to encourage that increased foot traffic. So whether it is, somebody visiting the Appel Center for a show, and if they show their ticket at a business in the Waco district, they can get a certain percentage off their sale, or vice versa. I don't know if any of those things are already happening, or if any of our panelists today could share about those things, or maybe offer some advice if you're trying to do those cross-district collaborations in terms of like sales and promotions.
We did something like that for our Creek Fire event. So we went to several businesses in other districts and asked them if we could do chalk on the outside, on the sidewalk outside of their business, which just said like Creek Fire, Foundry Park, and had the date, and that was it. And then if you would walk inside of that business and say, what is that chalk that I saw outside, then they would hand you a flyer about Creek Fire and tell you a little bit more about it. And then in return, we said, what can we take from your business? Like, do you have cards? Do you have upcoming things that we can promote? Do you have something we can hang on the wall?
Great. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about all the districts being a lot more full with businesses, like our retail spaces, there's not that many vacant retail spaces, and I think downtown as a whole, which is exciting. And so it's given everyone a lot more opportunity to be not the only one of that type of thing, which opens up a lot of collaborative opportunities. So recently, there's 5 vintage stores downtown now. So in April, we all came together and printed a postcard that just says, here's all the vintage stores within walking distance. And so anytime someone comes in our store and says, oh, are there any other cool vintage shops? Like, we can hand them a postcard and it's easy. And then because we already had that postcard last Saturday, we did like a map challenge, which was if you go to all the locations and get your postcard stamped, you're entered to win a gift card. And that's kind of all it took. Like, I created a graphic and everyone shared it multiple times on social media. We stayed open our normal store hours. We didn't have to add any extra staff. We had already paid the $25 each to go in for a bulk order of the postcards. And I had dozens of new people come in that I'd never even seen before and didn't know that I was there. And that's probably one of the like easiest, low stress, low amount of work co-promotion things I've ever done. And the return rate was amazing. And so we're definitely going to be doing it again. And I'm excited about the possibility of stuff like that happening, to connect people between the districts and stuff, because 4 of the shops were in the Market District, but 1 was in Waco. And then the best part about it was just by happenstance, York Flea was that day as well. And so they had to walk through Continental Square where York Flea was to reach Royal Square. So then they got to visit all of those businesses over there. And there was actually 3 vintage stores popping up there. So it was it worked out even better than we had planned.
That's great. And that's a great story to kind of showcase that easy collaboration. It wasn't a lot of planning, but it, really drove a lot of foot traffic and really helped all involved. Jen, you want to jump in here?
I do. I feel like a little, not at the outsider, but in a sense, like I'm not really active within the districts, but in the sense of, I have a stand at Market, but my next venture is at the end of the month is Soul Sip and Savor, which is authors and artists. So I'm bringing 3 artists that are not from York to York. So one's from Maryland, one is from Georgia, and one is from North Carolina. But the 3 artists are local. So Shamar Mosley, Jason Martin, and then Paul Duke is a photographer. So we'll be featuring their work. And then I have musicians, Brittany Walker, Sergio Paul, and then a young lady, Kayla, they'll be singing. So for me, I understand the goal within the York itself, but for me, it's also, we talk about bringing people from the outside in and giving them a different experience. So that's extremely important to me as a woman of color, to bring people of color from outside in so that they have a different and unique spin on what York City maybe their perception was, and give it, there's something different. So that's also that's my goal. Not to say that working with the districts is not a goal of mine, but for me personally, that's like what drives me. The drive is, experiences to expose the Black and Brown community in a different light, or show in a different light. That's extremely important to me. So I think that's kind of the angle that I take from my event standpoint. I should put it that way. So
no, and that's wonderful. And you're talking about a really important element that we didn't talk a lot about today, but just cross collaboration beyond just our districts, and bringing folks in from outside. And let me also point out too that Yorktown is going to open this fall, and it's going to bring people from outside of our community, and it's going to drive foot traffic. If people are staying at the Yorktown, they want to stay there for an experience, right? We have plenty of other hotels in our region that they can stay at. But they're making a choice to stay in downtown York, where everything is walkable, all these businesses and on the Downtown Inc. side, we're doing a lot of work with the Yorktown management to market everything that's happening in downtown York, whether it's QR codes in the individual rooms or having information at the front desk, just to increase traffic. I mean, the entry plaza to the Yorktown is on the backside of the Yorktown, and it's a block from Royal Square. I mean, for all the visitors out of town, they can visit all those great art galleries and things happening there. So, as business owners on this call, be thinking about ways that you can appeal to outside visitors, because we're going to have them coming soon. They're booking rooms, starting in January. The date may move back even earlier. So be thinking about ways that you can attract folks from outside of town and capitalize on that. So we have a lot of questions coming into the Q&A, so we'll jump into those now. And if anybody else has any questions, feel free to add them. We'll keep going until we run out of time. This is a great question here. We'll start with this one, and I think we all probably have something to say with this. But how do you avoid oversaturation in the event scene? As I mentioned before, there's a lot of events happening in New York City, which is great. But sometimes they can be perhaps a little redundant or even on the same day. So how do you go avoiding that oversaturation?
By providing something that has a unique angle. Trying to think of events that not only play to your strengths, but that I'm hearing an echo. Is that me? Sorry.
If everyone else wants to mute, and Melissa, you can keep talking.
Okay. Yeah, I just think by trying to find whatever that, unique proposition is that you have to offer. We also, before we plan an event, we check the 365 calendar and just see, what else is out there, what's going on. If someone is doing the exact same thing, then maybe it's not needed from us, or maybe we have something a little different to offer at even a different time. Like the holidays are coming up, so everyone is planning their Christmas offerings or events. So, we've been trying to think in our meetings, like, how can we offer something unique? How can we offer something different?
Great. And Kate, I think you want to jump in there. How do you avoid oversaturation?
Always ask around and Google search your dates and what you're trying to do. The biggest thing too is like, don't just expect to find it where you get your news and information. Like I can look on my own Facebook and be exposed to the events that I see because of the people that I'm friends with. So being exposed to like other people and other types of events. We see this a lot and we worry about it a lot when it comes to beer and wine events. A lot of people think like, oh, I'll make a bunch of money. Let me just run a beer event. Beer events don't make a lot of money and they're very hard to do and very dangerous for your license if you do them wrong. And so we actually work with a lot of people to help them figure out, if that's something they want to do. But oversaturating the market for something like that could be bad for us as a small business. So it is you have to be careful with what you're doing. And, holidays, like Melissa said, are a tough one because everybody wants to get some of that holiday money. So just being really cognizant of who you're trying to reach, what you're trying to do differently, and trying to just kind of dig with what's going on and what are you competing with? And what are you competing with outside of York? We just realized Brew Kids on the Block is the same day as the Gettysburg Wine Festival. Now our beer drinkers are not necessarily drinking sweet Gettysburg wine, but it is something that with our vendors, it's becoming somewhat of an issue, so.
Yeah, I think in my experience, you want to make sure that like for example, with 717 Vintage Fest, I need to be aware of when all of the vintage or vintage adjacent area things are going on. Because I don't want to be on the same weekend as them. One, because that's going to pull customers away, and two, that's going to pull the best vendors away. And it's a waste of my time and everybody's time to host an event the same weekend. So it's helpful to know those people, but also just to know of them and be following them on Instagram or whatever, just so your dates aren't conflicting. But also, I think in general, what I found a lot of success in is creating events that aren't actually events. They're just like co-promotion, collaborative events. So some examples of that are like Restaurant Week. That's not me, but it's just a week where everyone comes together and they say, come to all of our restaurants. So each restaurant does their thing and no one is doing the thing that that restaurant is doing, but they're all collectively saying, come to restaurant week. And speaking of like the holiday season, like Small Business Saturday, like everyone comes together and all they say is come downtown for Small Business Saturday. And then what you do on your end is you focus on like your niche, your customers, your audience. You focus on your email list and your Instagram followers. But as long as everyone is saying that overarching message of come downtown on Small Business Saturday, then we all are successful, because if we all get our hundreds of people to come into our store, that's where the foot traffic grows, and they stop into other stores and restaurants and coffee shops and bars and find new places that they've never seen before and maybe don't even have time to go into that day, but at least they know they're there, and then they come back again. And so that's what I've been doing a lot lately, is like doing co-promotion things where everyone focuses on their niche, so we don't have to we don't have to duplicate anything anyone else is doing well. We just work together to build each other up. And that's basically where York Arts Week came from as well. Like we just said, anything that you're already doing that week, like let's work together to promote it. And then stuff kind of grew from there, and people are having more events. But York Arts Week actually isn't planning any events really. They're just co-promoting.
Yeah, it's a great point. Question, and this is Jen. I was really interested in the event you're describing coming up soon, bringing in artists from out of state, really out of our region, as well as musicians. And this is a question that maybe I can start with you, Jen, and we can branch out from here. But when working with other individuals or other businesses, do you have any kind of like contract or an agreement in place? Or would you recommend doing that or not doing that? And you can answer that because you work with both businesses and individuals. So what would you recommend?
Well, the individuals that are coming, the artists, first of all, they're like my friends. So there's really no, there's really no contract per se. But I did like, and I know the Kate, whatever, like with the other events with vendors, but there's obviously a contract that they have to abide to, set up times, all those things. That is extremely essential. Like just as a vendor for all these years and observing what the expectations were by the people running the events, I gained so much knowledge just from the outside looking in before I did my first event, because I was like, yo, these people are showing up like 2 minutes before this is about to start. And like, I see why the event, organizers are frantic, because it created chaos. So I think you have to be a student of everything, right? So it doesn't matter if you're cooking, if you're planning events, you have to be a student of the game. And so going into it, yes, the contracts were important. Establishing an ongoing email, like this is the expectations, creating the outline, the guidelines. And like Melissa said, like leading by example. So people really thought the first time I did like I was a crazy woman, but then they realized I really wasn't crazy. Like the expectation was here so that we all are successful. I'm doing like, we're doing this so everyone can succeed. We're doing this so everyone's business can grow. And so I think that having these contracts in place and these expectations in place is really kind of paramount. We partnered with Halavaca, with Stolwolf Bourbon, or I think, and Lidditz, so these different places. So we had these partnerships from that standpoint. But then whether it's your DJ, whether it's your musician, so you need to have everybody aligned with the expectations of the day. And I do think the contracts are, first, in certain situations, are pretty important, to be honest with you. So
I would say too, especially if money is going to be exchanged, even if it's a friend of yours, or like a musician. I found that with like Box Lunch Review, like you're expected to be ready to set up and sing at this time, and these are the reasons you would not get paid. Or if you're collaborating, we're going to pay all of our bills, and then once we have figured out how much we're all going to make, this is how we will divvy up the rest. Just especially if you are working with friends, you don't want to mess up friendships over technicalities or like misunderstood verbal agreements and stuff like that too.
I'm seeing a lot of head nodding when Jen and Kate were sharing there about the necessity of contracts. So it sounds like it's good all around. This question is similar. There's 2 questions here, and I'll tie them together. The first question is, do you have any tips for budgeting? And the second question that would relate to this is a sponsor necessary? So tips for budgeting, and is a sponsor necessary?
Man, if you have all the money in the world, sponsors are not necessary. But sponsorship, I don't know, I can speak for myself. Sponsorships are much more difficult to come by in a post-COVID world, I feel like. So I like to try to get my bases covered. I'm not trying to make a lot of money. I'm just trying to, if you want to sponsor a porta pot for $100, I'll put your name on it. You know, all those kinds of things. We actually run What the Food Trucks at a loss, but we believe it's a really important community event, so we keep going. Budgeting is key, and I'm happy to share what we do. We have spreadsheets, so if anybody's looking to kind of get that stuff up and running, we have sponsorship brochures that I'm happy to share with you guys, if anybody's looking to kind of get started on that stuff. I always really encourage people who are getting started with events to really look at your costs and then to try to get those costs covered. Because if you can just break even to do something that you really believe in, that's great. If you can make money, that's even better.
Wonderful. Any else advice for budgeting or sponsorship?
My advice for budgeting, obviously the first step is like research. Like if you think, oh, $2,000 should be enough for this event, but you don't do any research to say like how much porta potties cost per day, plus the delivery fee, you know, stuff like that. Like you got to do your research to know what to expect so that then you're charging your sponsors or your vendors, or you're getting the right amount of donations based on your researched costs, because you don't want to be at the end thinking $2,000 was enough and then have $1,000, I don't know, permit that you didn't know you needed. And a lot of the research is contacting people. Like all of us are willing to share what we've learned. That's literally why we're here right now. But, you know, if you want to have some food trucks, like Kate is the person to talk to, and she can say like, if you need a food truck, go to the website, here's our list of food trucks, or, you know, whatever, we can help guide you towards contacts and stuff like that. And then the other key to the budget is like, make sure you're following up with yourself on your budget. Like every time you pay for something, update the budget. So you know how much money you have left. And every time you receive a vendor payment, update the budget. And then I use Google spreadsheets on my budget. And then you can do a little formula that says like, depending on how much money you have in, a certain percent like set aside. Like I have 10% that's just like question mark. And I always know like, hey, if I make that money at the end, that's great. I can save it for next time. Or if there's any unforeseen, unexpected expenses, like a bunch of your vendors drop out, like you have that wiggle room too. And it like auto fills and you have it.
Great, thank you. Question that was submitted here from a attendee. I think it's a really important question. When you have collaborated on events with other businesses in the past, and this could be, you know, collaboration in all sense of the word, did you see a positive outcome in terms of sales, revenue, new customers, and then how did you measure that? Is there any kind of mechanism you've used to measure that? So perhaps some of you could share some anecdotal evidence of this, either good or bad.
I do. We did a fundraiser last year, and we collaborated with two other businesses downtown, and we each had it on the same day for like a First Friday event. And we had so many people who came to the shop and said things like that they had never been to the barbershop before, that they had never heard of us. And we put out like a sheet to collect contact info. So we got so many people added to our newsletter, to our mailing list. So that's just like something that's anecdotal. People told me they'd never heard of us. They gave us their contact information. So now they're blasted on our newsletter.
That's great.
And I think I've also like learned a lot from unsuccessful collaborations. Like I've done a lot of things where multiple businesses were involved and not a single person came in that day, or not a single person came in that said that that was the reason why they were there. So maybe there were some people there that already knew about me and heard about the event, or didn't say that they were there because of that. And, you know, there's a lot of lessons to be learned and stuff like that. Like maybe that type of event isn't for me, but it's still great for them. Maybe it's not a bad event, it's just not for your business, and that's okay. Or maybe, you know, you work with a group of people and you put your heart and soul into something and it doesn't work. And then you can kind of see like, okay, we tried this, that didn't work. Let's do it this way this time, or maybe a weekend instead of a weekday or something like that. There's still a lot to learn from unsuccessful collaborations that can help you move forward. It does suck that it was unsuccessful, but you can still learn a lot and move forward and grow from that. And don't be burned from never doing an event again or something like that, because all of us have had unsuccessful or not as successful as we hoped for events, but we're still like, we learn and we grow and move on. And hopefully your next event, you've learned the lessons and you grow from that.
And any way that you can gather information too, whether it's like the contact sheet or just anecdotally saying like, how did you get here? Or if you sell tickets, any ticket you buy to any event of mine is an option to say, how did you hear about us? And it includes like radio. Another human told me, I saw a poster. We for years used to pay for and do radio spots. Nobody has ever said they heard about us through radio. So we don't do that anymore. So, just so if you do have a collaboration, if it is like for our beer events, if it's a brewery, then sometimes we find out which breweries and we reward them for being good, spokespeople of our event. So yeah, that's the former journalist in me, is like, where do you get your news and information? So if you can reward those people for collaborating and spreading the word too, that's great. Deputize them for being your people.
For me, I think with the events that we did, so many, I'm probably older than everybody. So like the social media shares, so like the people helping me utilize social media on a broader scale, that allowed us to get feedback after the events. And then we did Eventbrite. So we got a lot of the feedback as well from the emails that we received, afterwards. But I think that the collaborations, just everybody involved knowing that, not that it's not our responsibility as the organizers, but the more everybody within the process is sharing, again, everyone's going to benefit as a result. So I think that's my biggest thing when I have conversations with people that might be vendors or whatever, and whatever way they're working with us, that we all kind of have a little bit of ownership to it, not just because, you're paying money to be a vendor, but you want to bring your crowd of people too. Like your crowd of people might like what Jess has, or, somebody else has. So it's like, everyone's, you want to have different touch points. It's not just about you, it's about everybody involved, so that everybody can be elevated through the process. So I think there's an ownership factor. And then once that happens, then the feedback typically comes through because you're coming from all these different angles if everybody has participated in the marketing aspect of it. You know what I'm saying? So like we did get a lot of feedback, like people, I never heard of this vendor, I never heard of this vendor. And I think that was extremely beneficial once everybody was together in the notion of like, let's promote this as one. So.
Also be prepared for people to tell you things that you don't want to hear or things that are stupid. And that's okay. They're going to say your marketing's terrible and nothing you did was right. And it's like, but you still got here. So clearly something I did was right. Just ignore it, laugh about it, tell us about it. We'll giggle with you, tell other stories that are bad too. Be prepared for jerks. It's cool.
And a lot of like, you should do this next time. You should do this next time. And you're just like, I have 0 hours in my day, but thank you for the suggestion.
Or please bring an invitation directly to my house. That's the only way I get my news and information. All right, I'm right on it.
People are people, right? So one final question before we wrap up here. And this is a question we may have answered in some iterations before, but maybe we can all kind of summarize together. But this person said, I'd like to participate in an event as a co-host, but I'm never asked. What is a good way to make that leap with the event hosts?
Send an email, shoot them a note. We all want help. Come help us.
Yeah, all you got to do is ask. Come in person, get our number from someone and text us. I mean, as long as it makes sense for the event, or even if it doesn't, we could probably find a way to make it make sense. Yeah, love it.
Great. So after this, Jen, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback because there's some people like with the next one we're doing, and people are asking me like, how did you decide upon the artist? I'm like, these are my friends. Like I just random, not anything like, so it wasn't like I was slighting anyone. It was just my friend became, she's a published author. I wanted to celebrate her. Then I thought of other people I knew. So I think people also have to look at it. It's not like we as businesses are out here like, oh, I'm not going to use Kate. Like that's not the mindset. People are just moving forward, trying to create an event. And if, like Jess said, like if you reach out and say, hey, this is what I do, I think people are more than likely to say, oh yeah, of course, like, come on, it's like, of course I'll include you. But the mindset can't be that we're excluding. I think that's another, like what Kate says, like that's an issue. Like we're not out there excluding people. Like we want to be inclusive, but you have to let us know what you're doing and what you're about. And I think it's a two-way street. Let me put it that way. It's a two-way street.
So the communication is key.
Yes, John.
And following this webinar, all attendees will receive an email with the recording of this, but as well as content information for all the panelists today. So speaking of, I do want to thank our panelists, Jess Weichert, Kate Harmon, Melissa Rosario McGarry, and Jen Heasley for joining us today. Wonderful panel discussion today. I feel we could have gone for a long time, but a lot of great sound advice for small business collaborations. So thank you all for being here. Appreciate all that you do for downtown York, and thank you for being here today to join us on this panel discussion. I do want to give us all a few announcements, things that are important to the merchants of downtown York. And as we're going, JJ in the back end will be dropping in the links on the chat. So many of you were in attendance last week at the Downtown First Awards, our 22nd annual Downtown First Awards. If you missed the announcement of the finalists and the winners, you can check out that link that was dropped into the chat, and be thinking about the 23rd annual Downtown First Awards happening next year. It's a great celebration of our community, not only individuals, but organizations and businesses. And we love highlighting and telling the stories of successes of downtown York. So if you weren't able to join us this year, we hope you can join us next year. Also important in terms of collaborative events, save the date for October 29th. Is Sweetest Pint. If you're not familiar with Sweetest Pint, it's a chance for us to showcase businesses around downtown York as a walking tour, where we pair local craft beer with local food, and we're really intentional about showcasing businesses that people don't often know about or may not associate with beer and with food. A chance for us to really expose people to downtown York and what's happening here. Once again, it's October 29th. If you want to stay up to date on all things happening with Downtown Inc., you can subscribe to our merchant newsletter. We put those out periodically to communicate important information, anything from grants to upcoming webinars to events, anything that merchants need to know. Speaking of, our next Bloom class is the 101 startup level class, and it's being offered in Spanish. It's being titled The Alphabet Soup of Having a Business. It's going to begin on August 18th and run through September 15th. So if you are a Spanish speaker and you would like to learn more about owning a business, or you know somebody who would like to start a business or is really just starting that process and they're a Spanish speaker, get them connected to the Bloom class starting up in August. We've received a lot of questions about the George Street paving project. It's always fun to talk about those kind of things happening. Who doesn't love construction, right? So we've been in communication with the city as well as the city architect to get information to communicate to merchants about the paving project. As you know, or may not know, but if you drive in downtown York, you know that construction is underway from city line to city line on George Street North and South. And while the end product will be great in terms of flow of traffic and pedestrian visibility, all those good things, it does create some headaches in terms of getting around the construction. So if you're interested in learning more about the construction schedule, you can reach out to me. My email will be dropped into the chat there, and I can let you know about the construction schedule as well as updates for that. And by the end of this week, I'm also anticipating receiving an updated schedule as it relates to the Appel Center and Restaurant Row, because there is some questions about outdoor dining and Appel shows. So I will get that communication out to you when I receive it at the end of this week. The Downtown York Bloom Grant closed on July 29th, and we are going to be announcing very soon who the recipients are of that grant program. Also, as many of you know, we do a Downtown York magazine quarterly. And if you and your business do not already receive some of those magazines to distribute to your customers, you can email Hannah Beard, hbeard@downtownyorkpa.com, to be added to the distribution list, and you can request a certain amount of magazines. And those magazines are, they showcase all the great things happening in downtown York. We always have a feature on Downtown Dweller, showcasing somebody who lives downtown, as well as a wide variety of businesses and events. We also distribute those throughout the state and also adjacent states through Getaways on Display. So if you're ever driving into Pennsylvania and you stop at a rest stop, you'll probably see our Downtown York magazine there. So But if you don't already receive it for your customers and you want to have some in your shop or your restaurant or your store, et cetera, reach out to us and we'll get those distributed to you. And last but not least, we've already mentioned the York Arts Week is kicking off on August 20th and it runs until the 27th. And there are at least 40 events and counting happening citywide. If you're interested in checking that out, go to yorkartsweek.com. All right, so we're just about out of time. So I appreciate all of our attendees joining us today. Once again, thank you to our panelists. We hope you'll be able to join us again next month for our Bloom Business Series workshop. It's on Wednesday, September 21st at 8:30 a.m. And we'll be hearing from another small business panel who will be sharing best practices for digital marketing. So have a great day, everybody, and thanks for tuning in.